A dark forest holds a secret light deep within its branches. Across continents and centuries, people have stood in the shadows and witnessed an impossible sight: trees that glow with their own mysterious radiance. This is not a single story, but a global tapestry of wonder. From the scrolls of ancient Rome to the whispers of Siberian shamans, historical records are filled with accounts of luminous trees. By the end of this journey, you will have explored 25 of the most compelling historical descriptions of these glowing botanical wonders, spanning from myth to modern mystery. What did Marco Polo truly see in the Asian woodlands, and why did medieval monks paint trees with halos of gold? The answers lie in a forgotten world where nature's magic felt profoundly real. What does it say about us that we have always been drawn to light in the deepest dark? Our journey begins in the whispers of a world that may never have existed. Ancient Greek poets and historians spoke of a land beyond the north wind, a place they called Hyperborea. This was not a country you could find on any map, but a concept, a divine paradise where suffering and old age were unknown. The sun was said to shine there for 6 months without setting, bathing everything in a continuous, gentle twilight. And within that endless day, the very trees were described as possessing their own light. The poet Pindar wrote of Hyperborea's blessed inhabitants living in a state of perfect harmony, free from toil and battle. Herodotus, the father of history, recorded travelers' tales of this distant utopia, though he admitted he could find no one who had actually been there. The glow of Hyperborea's forests was not seen as a scientific curiosity, but as a spiritual signature. It was the radiant footprint of the god Apollo, who was said to spend his winters there, his celestial chariot infusing the land and its flora with a sacred luminescence. This first description sets a crucial pattern, blending awe for the natural world with a deep human yearning for paradise. The glowing tree is not just a plant, it is a symbol of a perfect world, a beacon in the mythic darkness. It makes you wonder, what real, tangible wonder, perhaps the shimmer of Arctic moss under the midnight sun, or the bioluminescence of certain fungi reported by weary travelers, could have been so profoundly beautiful that it became the cornerstone of an entire legend. From myth we move to a man who believed he was documenting fact. Centuries after the Greeks dreamed of Hyperborea, a Roman scholar named Pliny the Elder compiled a staggering work meant to catalogue the entire natural world. His Naturalis Historia was an encyclopedia of everything known or rumored to exist, and within its sprawling volumes, nestled among accounts of exotic beasts and strange lands, is a brief, astonishing entry. Pliny describes a tree in India known as the lycus. He writes that by day it appeared as any other tree, but when night fell, it began to shine with such a brilliant light that it could illuminate the surrounding forest. He even claims the glow was so intense that local people would use branches from the lycus as torches to light their way through the dark woods. This is a pivotal shift in our story. This is no longer a poetic symbol of a distant paradise, but a practical report of a functional, glowing object in a real, if remote, location. Pliny presents it as a natural curiosity, a fact of the world to be recorded. So what was he actually describing? One compelling theory points to bioluminescent fungi. Certain species of mushrooms, like the modern jack-o'-lantern fungus, emit a soft, greenish light from their gills. If a tree was heavily infested with such fungi, its trunk and branches could indeed appear to glow in the darkness of a deep forest. To a traveler from Rome, the sight of a tree seemingly producing its own light would be miraculous. Another possibility involves phosphorescence. Some minerals and decaying wood can absorb sunlight during the day and release it slowly as a faint glow at night. A tree whose bark was rich in such compounds, or one that was rotting in a specific way, might create a similar effect. Then there is the human element of the tale itself. Pliny was a voracious collector of stories, often compiling reports from soldiers, merchants, and explorers returning from the edges of the empire. The account of the Lycus tree likely came to him second or third hand, a traveler's tale that grew brighter with each retelling across thousands of miles. A faintly shimmering fungus becomes a blazing botanical torch by the time it reaches Rome. This account is so important because it sits at the crossroads of observation and legend. It shows us the moment a wonder of nature is captured by a scholarly mind, filtered through the lens of empire and exploration, and cemented into history as a strange but accepted truth. The Lycus tree challenges us to ask how many of history's wonders began as a kernel of real, observable phenomena, only to be polished into legend by distance and awe. Pliny's report of a practical, glowing torch tree is a world away from the next vision of light rooted in the cold, rugged soil of Norse belief. Here, the luminous tree was not a tool, but a pillar of the cosmos itself. At the heart of Norse mythology stands Yggdrasil, the immense world tree, an ash whose branches hold the heavens and whose roots delve into the realms of gods, giants, and the dead. While Yggdrasil itself is often described as evergreen and immense, the sacred texts hint at groves within the 9 realms where the very woodlands were alight. Consider Alfheim, the homeland of the light elves. Described in the poetic Edda as a place of radiant beauty, it was a realm adjacent to that of the gods. The light elves were beings of pure magic and grace, and it was said their landscape reflected their nature. Within Alfheim, glades and forests were believed to shine with a soft, silver-white luminescence, as if the trees had absorbed and stored the light of the stars. This was not a harsh, fiery light, but an ethereal glow that defined the realm as fundamentally other, a place where the ordinary rules of the world did not apply. The light from these trees symbolized the inherent magic of the land and the profound knowledge possessed by its inhabitants. It marked a boundary between the mundane world of humans, Midgard, and the enchanted realms of the divine. To stand in such a grove was to stand in a place of power and ancient wisdom, where every leaf and branch pulsed with the secret energy of creation. This concept extends beyond just Alfheim. Other accounts speak of mystical groves within Vanaheim, the home of the fertility gods, or even hidden places in Midgard touched by elf light, where trees might glow under a full moon as a sign of a doorway to another world. The Norse vision transforms the glowing tree from a curious specimen into an architectural feature of the universe. It is a living beacon, a wayfinder in the spiritual geography of their beliefs, illuminating the path to knowledge, magic, and realms beyond human sight. Where Pliny asked what a glowing tree could do, the Norse asked what it meant. Its light was a language speaking of the sacred geometry of existence itself. This cosmic pillar of light finds a fascinating parallel in the ancient forests of Chinese legend, where trees did not just reflect divine power, they were its very source. Among the most majestic was the fusang, a colossal mulberry tree said to stand in the far east beyond the Eastern Sea. It was not merely a tree, but a living solar instrument. Mythology describes the 10 sons of early creation as birds that would roost in its branches. Each day, one of these sunbirds would embark on its journey across the sky, and the fusang tree was the launch point for dawn itself. While not always explicitly described as glowing on its own, its intimate connection with the sun imbued it with a profound, radiant quality in the minds of storytellers and artists. To stand before the fusang was to stand at the birthplace of daylight, where the wood itself must have held the warmth and light of countless sunrises within its grain. It represented cosmic order and cyclical renewal, a tree so fundamental that it supported the very mechanism of the day. But Chinese lore offers even more direct visions of botanical light, documented in one of the world's oldest and strangest collections of geography and myth, the classic of mountains and seas. This ancient text catalogues fantastical lands and their inhabitants, and within its pages we find trees that are unabashedly luminous, One account speaks of a tree that bore not fruit but glowing pearls. Imagine a forest where the branches hung with soft, radiant orbs instead of apples or nuts, casting a gentle, magical light through the woods. Another record describes trees with bark that shone with the polished gleam of jade. This connection is deeply significant. In Chinese culture, jade was far more than a precious stone. It was the essence of purity, moral integrity, and heavenly grace. A tree that shone like jade was therefore not a mere oddity. It was a living embodiment of virtue and spiritual perfection. These luminous trees were often said to grow in remote, sacred mountains where immortals dwelled or where rare medicinal herbs could be found. Their light served as a beacon, marking a place of exceptional spiritual energy and often imperial favor. It was believed that such wondrous growth could only occur under a just and virtuous ruler, linking the tree's radiance directly to the mandate of heaven. So a report of a glowing tree was not just a botanical note, it was a political and spiritual omen of the highest order. The light was a visible sign of harmony between the earthly realm and the celestial one. This transforms the phenomenon once again. From the Norse cosmic pillar to the Chinese jade-barked wonder, the glowing tree becomes a barometer of divine approval, its very luminescence proof that the world was in a state of blessed balance. What must it have been like for an explorer or a court official to claim they had witnessed such a thing, to bring back a tale not of a simple glowing fungus, but of a living jewel that validated an entire empire's virtue? The weight of that meaning shines far brighter than any simple biological explanation. The divine light of Chinese jade bark trees finds a powerful echo in the ancient forests of India, where a single banyan tree could hold the cosmos in its shade. Within the vast epics of the Mahabharata and Ramayana, trees are not just scenery, they are active participants in the drama of gods and heroes. One of the most profound examples is the celestial banyan, often described as growing in the heavens or within a sacred grove of the gods. This was no ordinary tree. It was said to be self-illuminating, its vast canopy of aerial roots and broad leaves radiating a soft, pervasive light that banished all shadows. This luminous banyan served as the ultimate divine meeting hall, a place where gods like Indra and Shiva would convene with great sages and celestial beings to discuss the fate of the universe. To sit beneath its glowing branches was to be in the presence of ultimate truth and cosmic law. The light of this tree is deeply tied to two essential Sanskrit concepts, Jyoti and Tapas. Jyoti is the pure, divine light of consciousness itself, the fundamental radiance that illuminates all creation. A tree that glows with Jyoti is therefore a direct manifestation of the divine source, a physical anchor for spiritual enlightenment. Then there is tapas, often translated as austerity or spiritual heat. Through intense meditation and discipline, sages were believed to generate an inner radiance, a literal glow of accumulated spiritual power. A sacred tree, having witnessed millennia of such profound tapas from the beings who meditated beneath it, could itself become infused with that radiant energy. The glowing banyan becomes a battery of blessed intention, its light a testament to the concentrated devotion of ages. This transforms a biological phenomenon into a spiritual achievement. The tree's luminescence is earned, a collective project of consciousness. It presents a beautiful idea that a place can become holy not just by declaration, but by the sustained focus of enlightened minds to the point where the very environment absorbs and reflects that sacred light. So when an epic poet describes a glowing banyan, they are giving us a map to a state of being. They are saying, here is where the veil between the material and the divine is so thin that even the wood shines. It makes you wonder, in our search for historical glowing trees, how many were said to shine not because of fungi or minerals, but because someone of immense spiritual presence simply sat there for a very, very long time. That sacred light of spiritual discipline would soon be channeled into a new kind of book, one bound in leather and illuminated with gold leaf. Across the monasteries and scriptoriums of medieval Europe, scribes were busy compiling bestiaries, volumes that catalogued the natural and supernatural world as they understood it. Among entries for lions symbolizing Christ and unicorns representing purity, you might find a curious sketch of a tree, its branches not green but shimmering with gold, often labeled Arbor Lucis, the tree of light. This was not a map to a distant forest, but a mirror held up to the soul. In these allegorical texts, the Arbor Lucis was almost never a literal plant. Its golden radiance was a direct symbol for divine wisdom, the illuminating truth of the Gospels, or Christ himself as the light of the world. Just as a tree provides shelter and sustenance, this spiritual tree offered enlightenment and salvation. Its light was meant to guide the faithful out of the darkness of sin and ignorance. An illustrator might depict it with a halo or show its roots drinking from a stream labeled Divine Grace, making the metaphor visually explicit for a largely illiterate populace. The glowing tree had become a sermon in pigment and parchment, yet the line between allegory and exploration was wonderfully blurred in the medieval mind. While the Arbor Lucis served a clear theological purpose, other accounts in travelogues and encyclopedias spoke of luminous trees in a more matter-of-fact way. These were often placed firmly in the distant, unmapped territories described by travelers like Sir John Manville, whose wildly popular and largely fictional travel memoir spoke of countless wonders in the East. In these reports, a glowing tree was not a symbol but a marvel, a curiosity from the fringes of creation that testified to God's boundless imagination. It was presented as a fact of a world so vast and strange that anything might be possible. A monk copying such an account might accept it as a real, if unreachable, natural phenomenon, a created wonder like the Magnet Mountain or the Fountain of Youth. This duality is fascinating. The very same culture that used the glowing tree as a profound spiritual symbol also eagerly believed in its physical existence in far-off lands. One represented inner truth, the other represented the outer limits of a world still filled with divine mystery. Both fed a medieval hunger for light in an age of literal and metaphorical darkness, where a candle was a precious commodity and the promise of heavenly radiance was a central tenet of faith. So when you look at those tiny, golden trees painted in the margins of a bestiary, you are seeing two powerful human impulses fused into one image, the need to find meaning and the desire to discover wonder. It asks us, where do we draw the line between the map of our beliefs and the territory of the real world, and how often do we want them to be the very same place? The golden trees of medieval bestiaries were symbols on a page, but one Venetian merchant claimed to have walked beneath branches of actual light. When Marco Polo dictated his famous travelogue, The Description of the World, he filled it with wonders that stretched the credulity of his European readers. Among these accounts was a brief but tantalizing mention of a type of wood in the Asian territories that possessed a strange and useful property. It glowed in the dark. He did not describe a whole, living forest aglow, but rather timber that retained this luminosity after being cut. This practical detail is what makes his report so intriguing. It suggests a tangible material, something that could be harvested, traded, or used. So what luminous substance was clinging to that wood? One strong candidate is a persistent and widespread fungus known as the bitter oyster mushroom or Panellus stypticus. This mushroom is a common decomposer found on rotting logs and stumps across Asia, Europe, and North America. Its gills emit a soft, greenish bioluminescence that is visible on damp nights. A traveler encountering a fallen log thoroughly colonized by this fungus would indeed see a piece of wood that seemed to hold its own ghostly light. The glow is caused by a chemical reaction within the fungus, a cold light produced as it breaks down the wood. Marco Polo or his sources might have seen such logs and understood them as a single miraculous entity, a glowing tree. Another possibility lies not in biology but in geology. Certain minerals, like phosphorescent salts containing compounds of barium or calcium, can absorb sunlight and release it slowly. If such minerals were present in the soil where a tree grew, or if they encrusted its bark, pieces of that wood could feasibly retain a faint, lingering glow for a short time after dusk. Yet the truth of what Marco Polo saw is almost secondary to the story he told. His narrative was carefully crafted for an audience hungry for the exotic and the miraculous. By including an account of glowing wood, he was fulfilling our expectation. He was placing a known wonder from European legend, like Pliny's Lycus tree, into the real mapped geography of his journey. It was a way to validate the entire incredible saga. If he could report something as fantastical as self-illuminating timber, then his descriptions of vast cities and incredible wealth must also be true. His glowing wood sits at the perfect intersection, a plausible natural phenomenon witnessed at the edge of understanding, then polished into a traveler's jewel to be brought home. It asks us to listen carefully to old tales, to hear not just the wonder, but the soft, decaying log and the faint chemical shimmer that might have started it all. Marco Polo's glowing timber was a traveler's trophy, but the next vision of light came from men who believed they had found paradise itself. When Spanish ships first made landfall in the Caribbean, the conquistadors and missionaries who stepped ashore were not just encountering a new land, they were walking into a living dream. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, the sounds were a chorus of strange creatures, and at night, in the dense rainforest of the mountain they named El Yunque, some swore the very trees were breathing light. Early colonial accounts from priests and soldiers speak of profound disorientation beneath that emerald canopy. After the sun vanished, a soft, blue-green glow would seem to emanate from the trunks of certain trees and from the moss clinging to their bark. It was not a fierce, fiery light, but a gentle, eerie radiance that made the forest feel awake and watchful. To these deeply religious men, it was a sign they could not ignore. Some saw it as a divine confirmation, a heavenly blessing upon their mission in this new world. Others, perhaps more superstitious, interpreted it as sorcery, the work of spirits fiercely protecting their home from the invaders. The forest itself seemed to be pushing back with its own silent, spectral luminescence. For centuries, this remained one of the great atmospheric mysteries of the New World, a ghost story told about a specific mist-shrouded mountain. The truth, when it was finally understood, was not in the trees at all, but in the sea. The modern explanation reveals a beautiful case of mistaken identity, a trick of light played on a grand ecological scale. The waters around Puerto Rico, particularly in the bioluminescent bays like Mosquito Bay on the nearby island of Vieques, are home to immense concentrations of microscopic organisms called dinoflagellates. The species Pyrodinium bahemans is a master of chemistry. When disturbed by a wave, a boat's hull, or even a swimming fish, each tiny cell reacts, producing an instantaneous flash of blue light through a reaction between a chemical called luciferin and an enzyme. On nights when these organisms bloom in vast numbers, the entire bay can shimmer with otherworldly radiance. Now, imagine the conditions on the slopes of El Yunque. The rainforest is perpetually humid with frequent mists and rains that sweep in from the ocean. On nights following a storm or when the winds were right, a fine, aerosolized spray from these glowing bays could be carried inland, settling over the forest like a luminous dew. This mist, filled with those microscopic sparks, would coat the broad leaves, the thick moss, and the gnarled bark. To a weary conquistador looking up, the source of the light would be impossible to pinpoint. The entire environment would appear to be softly glowing from within. The trees were not producing light, they were merely the canvas upon which the ocean's living light was painted. This revelation does not diminish the wonder of those historical accounts, it deepens it. It connects two seemingly separate worlds, the dense mountain forest and the starry sea, in a single, breathtaking atmospheric event. It tells us that sometimes to find the source of a mystery, you must look beyond the obvious to the invisible currents that tie a landscape together. The glow of El Yunque was never a lie. It was a magnificent misunderstanding, a moment where nature's grandeur was so interconnected that it truly made the mountains shine. The conquistadors saw a forest painted with the ocean's light, but in the quiet studies of Renaissance Europe, scholars pursued a different kind of illumination entirely. Locked away in coded manuscripts and intricate illustrations, alchemists described a tree that was never meant to grow in soil. They called it the Arbor Philosophica, the philosopher's tree. This was not a plant you could find on any map, but the ultimate symbol of the great work, the quest to transform base metals into gold, and more importantly, to purify the human soul. In these dense, mysterious texts, the tree was meticulously drawn, its roots in the earth of primal matter, and its branches reaching into the heavens of spiritual perfection. And crucially, it was almost always shown radiating light, often with a sun or stars nestled in its boughs. Each stage of the tree's growth, from the blackening of putrefaction to the whitening, yellowing, and final reddening, corresponded to a chemical and spiritual process in the alchemist's flask and heart. The tree's eventual luminescence represented the crowning achievement, the production of the philosopher's stone, a substance said to glow with its own inner light. This radiant tree was a diagram of enlightenment, a map where laboratory work and mystical revelation were one and the same. Its light was the light of true knowledge, hard-won and transformative. This symbolic tree had a strange, speculative cousin in the writings of other Hermetic thinkers, most notably Paracelsus, the bombastic and brilliant physician who blurred every line between science, magic, and spirit. Paracelsus wrote of the lumen naturae, the light of nature, a hidden radiance that permeated all creation. He and his followers proposed that just as stars shone in the sky, there were corresponding luminous plants and minerals within the earth itself. Some texts spoke of entire forests growing in the planet's subterranean cavities, their foliage providing a soft, eternal glow to those hidden realms. Others suggested these plants existed on an astral plane, a level of reality interwoven with our own but accessible only in altered states of consciousness or through deep meditation. In this view, a luminous tree reported by a traveler might be a momentary glimpse of this parallel botany, a crack in the world where the inner light of nature briefly leaked through. These ideas were not pure fantasy to them. They were an attempt to explain the world's wonders through a unified theory where the physical and spiritual were inseparable. A glowing fungus was not just a decaying organism, it was a literal expression of the lumen naturae, a signpost pointing to the living, conscious energy within all matter. So while the alchemist's tree charted an internal journey, the Paracelsian luminous plant suggested that the entire cosmos was in essence a kind of glowing garden waiting to be perceived. One tradition sought to create the light within a flask, the other believed it was already shining everywhere if only one knew how to see. That hidden light of nature, glimpsed in alchemical flasks and subterranean forests, found a hauntingly beautiful expression in the mists of Japanese folklore. Here, the glow was not a symbol of divine order or scientific pursuit, but a whisper from the other side. In countless kaiden, the traditional ghost stories told to send shivers down the spine on a summer night, there are accounts of the Hotarugi, the firefly tree. These were not merely trees where fireflies happened to gather. In the tales, the tree itself was the source of the light, a permanent, ethereal radiance that clung to its branches like a swarm of captured stars that never flew away. The light was described as a soft, blue-white or pale green shimmer, cold and silent, utterly unlike the warm, flickering dance of a real firefly. This was no gathering of insects but the tree's own spectral aura. Such trees were never found in cheerful, sunlit meadows. They grew in lonely mountain passes deep within forgotten cemeteries or at the lonely crossroads where three paths met. Their light served as a boundary marker, a natural warning sign written in luminescence. To encounter a hotaru tree was to know you had strayed into a liminal space, a thin place where the world of the living brushed against the realm of the dead, the yokai, and restless spirits. One common story tells of a traveler lost after dark who sees the gentle glow ahead and thinks it a welcoming inn or a village. Drawn toward the light, they find only a single ancient tree, its bark gnarled and its branches holding that eerie, motionless glow. As they stand bewildered, the forms of people might appear and vanish between its trunks, or a soft, mournful singing might be heard. The voices of those who were buried nearby, using the tree's light as a beacon for their ghostly gatherings. The tree became a portal, its roots in our soil and its luminous branches in the spirit world. This folklore stands in stark contrast to the breathtaking real-world phenomenon of firefly congregations. In certain humid summer nights, particularly near clean waterways, thousands of male fireflies of species like Genji botaru will synchronize their flashes in a breathtaking, silent symphony to attract mates. The trees they settle upon become temporary chandeliers of living light, a spectacle of biology so magical it feels supernatural. The ancient storytellers would have known this sight, and it undoubtedly fed their imaginations. But in the folklore, they took that observable wonder and transformed it. They asked, what if the light never left? What if it was not a celebration of life, but a memorial for the dead? The hotaru tree became a cultural container for deep-seated beliefs about respect for the dead, the sacredness of certain landscapes, and the ever-present proximity of the unseen world. Its cold, permanent glow was a reminder that some beauties are not meant to be approached, only acknowledged from a safe and reverent distance. It taught that not all light guides you home, some simply shows you where the borders of the known world truly lie. While Japanese folklore saw ghostly light in the trees, early American settlers found a more practical glow at their feet, one they could split with an axe and carry home. Deep in the old-growth forests of the Appalachian and Smoky Mountains, pioneers clearing land made a curious discovery. They called it lightwood or sometimes fatwood, and it was not a living tree but the remains of one. When a pine tree died and fell, its resin-rich heartwood and stump would often resist rot for decades. Settlers learned to identify these dense, amber-colored chunks of wood, prized not for any supernatural property, but for an utterly practical one. It was the best kindling imaginable, bursting into flame with a single spark. Yet under the right conditions, this same wood held another secret. On a dark, moonless night, if you split open a piece of this ancient, resin-soaked heartwood, the freshly exposed surface might emit a faint, eerie glow. It was not the bright light of a torch, but a soft, greenish-blue phosphorescence that seemed to hover just above the grain. This was no spirit or fungus, but cold chemistry at work. The glow came from the resin itself. Over years of decay, oxidative processes within the dense pine resin could produce compounds that were phosphorescent. When these compounds were exposed to air by a fresh cut, or when they slowly reacted in the damp darkness of the forest floor, they would release stored energy as that mysterious, faint light. For a settler family in a remote cabin, this phenomenon transformed a simple piece of firewood into a momentary marvel. Imagine the scene after a long day of labor. You step outside to fetch another log for the hearth. You split a piece of lightwood, and in the deep black of the forest night, the two halves seem to hold a captured piece of twilight. It would last only for minutes, perhaps an hour, before fading away as the chemical reaction completed. This tangible, useful magic was woven into the fabric of frontier life. The lightwood's primary purpose was fiercely practical, to start fires for warmth, cooking, and protection. Its secondary, fleeting glow was a bonus, a small wonder that spoke of the hidden processes of the natural world. It was a reminder that even in something as ordinary as a pine stump, there could be a latent energy waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. This account grounds our mystery in the soil of daily survival. Here, the glowing tree is not a distant legend or a spiritual symbol, but a resource, a chemical fact encountered by hands calloused from work. It asks us to look closer at the old stories, to wonder how many encounters with botanical light began not with awe, but with the simple, startling act of cutting into a log and finding the dark was not as absolute as it seemed. The practical glow of the American lightwood was a secret of the forest floor, but on the vast, ancient continent of Australia, the light in the trees came from the sky itself. For over 60,000 years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have woven the landscape and the heavens into a single, living story through the dreamtime. Within these profound oral traditions, specific trees are not just plants, they are archives of celestial events holding the very light of creation. One powerful narrative tells of ancestral beings who, after forming the rivers and mountains, took stars from the sky and placed them carefully into the branches of particular trees. These became star trees, natural lanterns that would guide people during the long, dark travels between waterholes and ceremonial grounds. The trees did not produce their own light, they safeguarded it, serving as living vessels for the cool, constant radiance of the ancestors. In another version, the tree itself is the result of a celestial capture. A falling star or a beam of moonlight might have struck the earth with such force and beauty that it grew roots and bark, transforming into a tree whose leaves forever shimmer with a memory of that first brilliant impact. These stories are not mere myths to explain a bioluminescent fungus, though such fungi do exist in Australia. They are intricate maps of responsibility, law, and identity. A star tree marks a sacred site, a place of immense spiritual power where the dreaming is especially close to the surface of the world. Its perceived luminosity, whether from actual reflected starlight on silvery leaves, patches of luminous fungi, or simply the deep knowledge of its significance, acts as a beacon. It says, "This place is different. This place holds a story you must respect." The glow is a sign of the ongoing connection between the land, the people, and the cosmos, a connection maintained through song, ceremony, and custodianship. To stand near such a tree is to stand at a crossroads of time, where the ancestral past is permanently present in the living landscape. This transforms our understanding of historical descriptions of glowing trees completely. It suggests that the most important light might not be visible to the unprepared eye. The true luminescence is in the story itself, a light carried for millennia in memory and song, illuminating a way of being in the world that sees no separation between the root and the star. The star trees of the dreaming connect heaven and earth, but in the royal courts of medieval Persia, artists painted that connection with brushes dipped in gold and lapis lazuli. Within the pages of the Shahnameh, the epic book of kings, and the lyrical verses of poets like Hafez, a luminous tree takes root as a central symbol of cosmic truth. This is the tree of life, known as the Gayakarana or the Ham tree, and in countless Persian miniatures, its leaves and fruits are not merely green but shimmer with a radiant metallic light. The effect is deliberate and breathtaking. Artists would use real gold leaf or flecks of precious minerals to illuminate the foliage, making the tree literally glow against the intricate patterns of the garden or palace behind it. This was not just artistic flair, it was a visual theology. In the mystical tradition of Sufism, which deeply influenced Persian art and poetry, light is the purest manifestation of the divine. God is often described as the light of the heavens and the earth. Therefore, a tree that glows is a tree touched by and revealing the presence of the divine. Its radiance symbolizes the light of divine knowledge, ilham, which illuminates the soul of the seeker, just as the painted gold illuminates the page. The tree's roots are in the material world, but its shining branches reach into the realm of the spirit, offering the fruit of immortality and wisdom to those who can perceive its true nature. One of the most powerful images is the simurgh, the mythical, benevolent phoenix-like bird, perched in the branches of this luminous tree. The simurgh itself is a symbol of the divine guide, and its nest in the glowing branches represents the ultimate sanctuary where the soul can attain enlightenment. The light of the tree, then, is the environment of sacred knowledge itself, a safe haven from the darkness of ignorance. Poet Hafez often used the metaphor of the radiant cypress tree in his works on divine love, suggesting that to be in the presence of such luminosity was to be in a state of spiritual intoxication and joy. The miniature painter and the poet were engaged in the same project, using their crafts to map a path toward the divine. The glowing tree on the page was an invitation, a fixed point of spiritual navigation. It asked the viewer to move beyond the physical beauty of the art and to contemplate the source of all light. In a world where gardens were considered earthly paradises, the most perfect garden would naturally contain a tree that shone with the uncreated light of God. This vision elevates the concept from folklore to philosophy. The Persian luminous tree does not haunt a crossroads or grow in a distant land. It is cultivated in the human heart and mind, blossoming on the page as a guide for anyone seeking to transcend the ordinary. It suggests that the ultimate glowing tree is not something you find, but something you learn to see, a transformation of perception where the whole world begins to reveal its hidden, sacred radiance. The Persian mystic's tree of divine light finds a haunting echo in the misty glens of ancient Ireland, where a branch was not just seen but heard. Celtic lore speaks of the scribe argat, the silver branch. This was no ordinary piece of wood. It was a living key cut from a tree that grew only in the otherworld, the realm of the eternal Tur Na and Og, the land of youth. Those privileged to carry it, often poets, seers, or deities like Manannán mac Lir, god of the sea, held an object of profound power. The silver branch was described as bearing 9 bells of pure silver, or sometimes apples of shimmering silver, and it possessed a dual magic. It emitted a soft, haunting, silvery radiance, a cold light that cut through the mortal gloom, and when shaken, it chimed with a sound of unearthly beauty, a melody that could enchant listeners into a trance, heal sickness, or command obedience from all who heard it. This sound was as crucial as the light. Together, they formed a sensory key, unlocking the barriers between our world and the next. To hold the silver branch aloft, its light glimmering and its bells ringing, was to thin the veil. It could open a path to Tur Na and Og, a paradise where time stood still and joy was everlasting. In some tales, the hero Bran Macfebel is summoned by a woman of the otherworld who holds such a branch. Its music lulls him to sleep, and he awakens to begin his voyage to the land of women. The branch itself is the invitation and the passport. This transforms the Celtic tree from a static symbol into an active instrument. The tree in the otherworld is the source, but the cut branch is the tool wielded by those who walk between worlds. Its luminescence is not a passive quality, but an active signal, a beacon announcing the presence of the numinous. It suggests that the boundary between the mortal and the magical is not a wall, but a permeable membrane, and the right combination of light and sound can make it dissolve. The silver branch asks us to listen as well as look. Perhaps the true historical wonder was not just a visual phenomenon, but an experience. A traveler in a deep forest, disoriented by fog, glimpsing a strange light through the trees and hearing a distant, inexplicable chime as wind passed through a peculiar formation of icicles or metallic leaves. The mind steeped in these stories would complete the picture, seeing not just a glowing tree but a doorway. The silver branch was a key to other worlds, but the 18th century demanded a key to this one. A new age of reason was dawning. The Enlightenment and its champions sought to explain the natural world through observation and experiment, not myth. Into the dark forests of Europe and North America marched a new kind of seeker, the naturalist, armed with notebooks, magnifying glasses, and a fierce determination to categorize everything. And they found the light waiting for them. They called it foxfire, a soft blue-green or sometimes yellowish glow found on rotting logs, damp stumps, and the forest floor on humid nights. For the first time, this phenomenon was not just witnessed, it was systematically studied. One of the most detailed early accounts comes from the French naturalist D. F. J. Marat de Vaumartus, who in the 1700s provided a meticulous description. He noted the glow was cold to the touch, that it required moisture to persist, and that it was most often associated with decaying wood. He and others like him began to correctly attribute the light to a biological source, specifically to certain fungi. The honey mushroom, Armillaria melia, a common but destructive forest fungus, was identified as a primary culprit. Its thread-like mycelium, spreading like a vast, invisible web through dead wood, would sometimes produce this eerie luminescence as it fed. This was a monumental shift. The glowing tree of legend was being dismantled piece by piece. It was not the tree itself, but a decomposer living upon it. The divine light, the spirit beacon, the star vessel, was reduced in the eyes of science to a simple chemical reaction within a fungus, a process we now call bioluminescence. The mystery seemed solved, yet the forest at midnight has a power that no laboratory report can fully erase. While naturalists wrote their precise papers, the common people who lived near those woods, the farmers, woodsmen, and travelers, still experienced the glow directly. And what they felt was not intellectual curiosity, but primal awe. In the pitch black of a moonless night, to come upon a fallen log pulsing with a cold, silent light was an encounter with the uncanny. The scientific explanation, if they even knew of it, did little to calm the nerves. That steady, ghostly radiance became known as will-o'-the-wisp light, fairy fire, or corpse light. It was said to mark where treasure was buried, or to be the lanterns of lost souls trying to lead the living astray. In some tales, the glowing wood was a warning, marking a place where someone had died or where the fairy folk held their moonless revels. The Enlightenment had successfully demystified the mechanism, but it could not demystify the experience. The foxfire continued to fuel ghost stories and local superstitions, proving that some wonders resist being fully catalogued. The naturalist's notebook and the woodsman's campfire tale existed side by side, two different truths about the same faint light in the dark. One asked how it worked, the other asked what it meant. And in that space between an explained phenomenon and a felt mystery, the ancient magic of the glowing tree found a way to persist, flickering softly on the page of science and in the shadow of the forest alike. While naturalists debated foxfire, Slavic villagers knew some trees held a deeper, older power. In the dense forests of Eastern Europe, folklore spoke of vast, ancient oaks that were not merely plants, but the very pillars of the world. These were not ordinary trees one could simply walk past. They stood as solitary giants in sacred groves or on remote, mystical islands like Bioluminescence, a place said to vanish and reappear with the tides, hidden by perpetual mist. According to the tales, these oaks were the center of cosmic order, an axis mundi whose roots plunged into the underworld and whose highest branches supported the heavens. And they were often described as glowing. Their leaves were said to shine with the metallic gleam of polished copper and burnished gold, casting a warm, protective radiance that kept dark forces at bay. This light was not a ghostly flicker, but a steady, divine fire woven into the bark and leaf. The tree served as a literal beacon of stability in a world believed to be constantly threatened by chaos. The most powerful of these oaks was sacred to Perun, the supreme god of thunder, lightning, and war. Imagine a towering oak on a high hill, a natural lightning rod. When storms raged, it would be struck again and again, the bark scarred and blackened by celestial fire. To the people, this was not destruction, but a divine charging. They believed that Perun's power was stored within the tree, and that in calm weather, it would release that energy as a soft, protective glow, a stored lightning that illuminated the sacred space around it. This made the oak a place of judgment, oath-swearing, and immense power. Agreements made beneath its glowing branches were sealed by Perun himself and could not be broken. The tree's luminescence was a sign of its active watchfulness, a guarantee that cosmic law was being upheld. The glowing oak was therefore a complete cosmic map. Its roots in the earth connected to the ancestors and the spirits of the soil. Its trunk in our world was the realm of the living, made safe and ordered by its light. And its shining crown, reaching into the sky, was the domain of the gods, a ladder that souls could climb. This idea transforms a simple biological phenomenon into a profound theological statement. A tree that glowed, whether from reflected sunset on autumn leaves, a peculiar lichen, or even the lingering energy of a past lightning strike, was seen as proof that the universe was still connected, that heaven and earth spoke to each other through this living wooden spine. It tells us that for the Slavs, light in the forest was not just a curiosity, it was a sign of a healthy cosmos, a visual prayer that the world was holding together as it should. The Slavic oak stored lightning connected heaven and earth, but in the sweltering jungles of Mesoamerica, this connection was mapped with breathtaking precision. In the surviving painted books of the Maya and the Aztecs, known as codices, artists illustrated the very architecture of the cosmos, and at its heart stood a tree that blazed with celestial fire. This was the Huacachan to the Maya, the Ceiba to the Aztec, the towering world tree. It was not a symbol of a connection, it was the connection itself, a living axis running straight through the center of all existence. And in these vivid, complex images, the tree is almost never shown as a simple green plant. In pages of the Dresden Codex or the Borgia Codex, you see something far more profound. Its branches are not leaves but writhing serpents representing the sky. Its roots plunge into the gaping maw of the earth monster, symbolizing Xibalba, the watery underworld. And along its trunk, or woven into its serpent branches, are glowing celestial bodies, radiant sun disks, gleaming stars, and crescent moons that shine with their own painted light. Sometimes the entire tree is shown emanating jagged rays, like a beacon broadcasting power in all directions. This luminescence was a visual code. The light represented the sacred energy that flowed along this central pillar, allowing for movement and communication between the three great layers of reality. Deities like the maize god would travel up this luminous path to be reborn in the heavens. The souls of kings and shamans would ascend it after death. Even the life-giving rain and the terrible power of lightning were believed to move along this channel. The tree's glow was the visible sign of this constant, vital traffic between worlds. To stand before a great ceiba tree in the physical world was to stand at a potential portal. The Maya believed certain caves were entrances to the underworld, and a giant tree growing above such a cave made the vertical connection literal. At dawn, when the first light hit the highest branches, or during a lightning storm when the trunk was briefly etched in fire, it would have been a confirmation of everything the codices depicted. The painted tree on bark paper was a diagram, and the living tree in the jungle was its functional counterpart, a piece of cosmic engineering made flesh and wood. This vision takes the concept of the luminous tree to its most structured form. Here, the light is not an aura or a stored energy, but a schematic. It shows the routes. The glowing bodies in its branches are not decorations, but destinations and waypoints on the most important journey of all, the soul's passage through a universe that was alive, interconnected, and brilliantly, intentionally lit. The precise diagrams of Mesoamerican codices gave way to a world of murky shadows and creeping dread. As the 19th century unfolded, the rational light of the Enlightenment dimmed in the popular imagination, replaced by a delicious, shivering fascination with the supernatural. In the damp, fog-shrouded countryside of Victorian England and across Europe, the forest at night was no longer a place of scientific inquiry, but a theater of the macabre. Here, in the pages of Gothic novels and in the whispered tales of rural villages, trees began to glow again, but this time their light was unmistakably ghostly. This was not the stored lightning of a Slavic oak or the celestial fire of a world tree. This was a faint, shifting, malevolent luminescence, the kind that made you question your own senses. Writers like Mary Shelley, Bram Stoker, and especially Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in his earlier horror stories populated their landscapes with haunted groves where the very air seemed thick with decay and the trees held a sickly, phosphorescent glow. In these stories, the light was rarely a property of the tree itself. Instead, it was an atmospheric haunting, a will-o'-the-wisp. These eerie lights were said to float and dance above marshy ground, luring the unwatched traveler off the safe path and into a bog, or worse, toward a waiting spectre. The glowing trees in these tales were often just the backdrop, their trunks and branches eerily illuminated by these wandering, intelligent flames. The light would catch on the damp bark of an ancient yew in a churchyard or flicker through the bare branches of a winter oak, creating the illusion that the woodland itself was alive with restless spirits. This folklore was a potent cocktail of fear and romance. On one hand, it tapped into a deep, primal fear of the unknown dark, of becoming lost and succumbing to an unseen, malicious force. The will-o'-the-wisp was a perfect metaphor for temptation leading to destruction. On the other hand, the Victorian era also romanticized this mystery. There was a perverse beauty in the melancholy of a haunted glen, a poetic sorrow in the idea of lost souls forever bound to a damp corner of the earth. The faint glow on the trees became a symbol of nature's profound, unsettling secrets that science, for all its progress, could not fully banish. It spoke to a cultural anxiety that perhaps the world was not as orderly and explained as the industrial age wanted to believe, that just beyond the gaslit streets of the city, in the ancient, untamed woods, older and stranger rules still applied, written in a cold, faint light upon the bark of sleeping trees. The ghostly will-o'-the-wisp haunted the Victorian imagination, but the age of exploration delivered a shock of color so intense it felt like captured light. When European ships first made landfall in the lush islands of the South Pacific, sailors weary of the monochrome sea were confronted by a sight that defied all reason. In their logs and journals, they struggled to describe the trees they saw on islands like Mindanao, New Guinea, and parts of the Philippines. They wrote of forests that seemed to be painted by a mad artist, of bark that shone with the colors of a permanent rainbow. They were witnessing the rainbow Eucalyptus deglupta, and while it did not glow in the dark, its appearance was so radiantly unnatural that to call it luminous in broad daylight felt like the only honest description. The bark of this tree undergoes a continuous, living transformation. As it matures, it sheds in long, vertical strips, revealing a fresh, bright green layer underneath. This new bark then ages through a stunning palette of blues, purples, oranges, and deep maroons, all streaked across the trunk in a vibrant patchwork tapestry. To a sun-dazzled sailor stepping ashore, the effect was not of a static plant, but of a living kaleidoscope, a tree that seemed to actively shimmer and shine as the light shifted through the canopy. In the lexicon of these early explorers, words like iridescent, lustrous, and yes, luminous, were often the closest approximations they had. A ship's naturalist might meticulously note the colors, but an ordinary seaman writing home would simply say the trees themselves were alight with color, as if stained by the setting sun. This report would then travel back to Europe, filtered through the expectations of an audience already primed by centuries of tales about the glowing lycus tree or the golden arbor lucis. The rainbow eucalyptus, stripped of its biological context, easily slid into that existing canon of radiant botanical wonders. It was a tree that truly did possess a miraculous, visible radiance, even if that radiance was a trick of pigmentation rather than bioluminescence. The sailors were not lying, they were simply overwhelmed. Their accounts remind us that light is not just a measure of photons, but a quality of awe. When something is that beautiful, that violently colorful against a green backdrop, it registers in the human mind as a form of brilliance. The tree was luminous because it lit up the imagination, branding itself into memory with the force of a revelation. It asks us to reconsider all those old logs and travelers' tales. How many reports of glowing trees were actually encounters with impossible, dazzling color, described with the only vocabulary of wonder these men possessed? The rainbow eucalyptus was a blaze of color, but some societies cultivated a light meant only for the initiated. Within the solemn halls of fraternal orders like Freemasonry, the most potent trees were not found in forests but in allegory. Central to their symbolic landscape is the sprig of acacia, a humble Mediterranean plant elevated to profound meaning. In Masonic ritual, this small branch is not merely a piece of flora, it is a beacon. It is presented as a symbol of immortality, of the soul's enduring life beyond physical death, and it is metaphorically described as a source of light that pierces the profound darkness of ignorance. This is a tree that glows not with biological luminescence, but with the radiance of secret knowledge. The story told within the lodge is poignant. It harkens back to the building of King Solomon's temple, where the master architect Hiram Abiff was said to have been murdered for refusing to divulge the secrets of his craft. According to the tradition, his body was later discovered through a clue. A sprig of acacia had been placed upon a makeshift grave to mark the sacred spot. From that moment, the acacia became forever linked with resurrection and the triumph of truth over oblivion. Its light is the light of recognition, a way for those in the light to identify a truth hidden from the profane world. In lodge iconography, you might see it depicted with rays emanating from its leaves or placed near a setting sun with the promise of a new dawn. This transforms the acacia from a plant into a password, a living symbol that says, "Here lies understanding." Its glow is conditional, visible only to those who have been taught its language. This idea extends beyond Freemasonry to other esoteric traditions that use the tree of life as a map of spiritual ascent, where each glowing sephira on the tree represents an emanation of divine light to be internalized by the seeker. The historical persistence of this symbolic glowing tree is a testament to a different kind of human encounter with light. It is not a wonder stumbled upon in a dark wood, but a light deliberately kindled and passed from hand to hand in a closed room. It represents the very human desire to create order from chaos by encoding wisdom into symbols, to craft a personal, shareable dawn in a world that can often feel shrouded in night. The Mason's acacia asks us, what is a light that only shines for those who know how to see it, and what power does such a hidden radiance hold? The Mason's acacia glowed with secret knowledge, but the dawn of the 20th century promised a light anyone could buy, a light sold in headlines. A new scientific discovery, radioactivity, captured the world's imagination with its invisible power and eerie glow. And almost immediately, the ancient myth of the glowing tree was reborn, dressed in the lab coat of modern science. Newspapers, always hungry for a sensational story, began to publish articles speculating wildly about the effects of radium on the natural world. One popular claim suggested that trees, with their deep roots, were acting as natural pumps, drawing radioactive elements like radium up from the soil. The theory went that this concentrated radium within the tree's very structure, causing it to emit a faint, perpetual, and potentially dangerous glow. Imagine a forest where every trunk was a silent, radioactive beacon. These stories were not presented as crackpot ideas, but as legitimate scientific possibilities on the frontier of a bewildering new field. They tapped directly into a public fascination mixed with deep anxiety about this unseen force that could both cure cancer and cause horrific burns. This speculative science bled effortlessly into the burgeoning world of pulp magazines. Writers of science fiction and sensational adventure stories seized upon the concept. Tales appeared of mad scientists injecting trees with radium solutions to create permanent, phosphorescent streetlights that would eliminate the need for electricity. Others spun narratives of explorers stumbling upon lost valleys where the soil was so rich in radioactive ore that the entire ecosystem glowed with a deadly beauty, a paradise that poisoned those who lingered. The glowing tree was no longer a spiritual symbol or a natural curiosity. It was a product of human tampering, a testament to either brilliant innovation or hubristic folly. This was a profound refresh of the ancient myth. The light was now explained. It had a source, a mechanism, and a name, radium. Yet the emotional core remained identical, or mixed with fear in the face of a natural wonder that defied ordinary experience. The public, bombarded with real advertisements for radium-laced tonics and face creams that promised rejuvenation, was primed to believe that this miraculous substance could transform anything, even a humble oak. The hoaxes and sensational stories succeeded because they bridged a gap. They used the vocabulary of cutting-edge science to validate a timeless human longing, the desire for a world touched by magic, even if that magic was now measured in curries. It showed that with every leap in understanding, we first use our new tools to remake our oldest dreams, painting them with the luminous, treacherous brush of the unknown. What does it say about us that the same wonder that once pointed to heaven could so easily be repackaged as a commodity or a warning from the heart of the atom? Radioactive dreams of glowing forests were a modern fantasy, but for millennia, a different kind of inner journey has revealed trees of light that feel utterly real. In the deep rainforests of the Amazon and the frozen expanses of Siberia, shamans and healers have long described a vision so consistent it transcends culture, a vast, pulsing, luminous tree that forms the spine of the cosmos. These are not trees you find by walking, but by traveling inward, often with the aid of sacred plants like ayahuasca or through rhythmic drumming and trance. In the Amazonian tradition, the brew known as ayahuasca, the vine of the soul, frequently opens a doorway to what practitioners call the cosmic tree or the great tree of life. This is not a passive image, but a living entity experienced with overwhelming intensity. It is described as an immense fractal network of light, its branches and roots extending into infinite dimensions, connecting every living thing. The tree pulses with a vibrant, intelligent luminescence, often in brilliant blues, golds, and whites, and it is understood to be the source of all healing knowledge and the template of creation itself. To encounter it is to communicate with the conscious intelligence of the forest. Siberian shamans journeying to the upper and lower worlds with the steady beat of a drum report an almost identical vision. They speak of the world tree, its roots in the underworld, its trunk in the middle world of humans, and its glowing crown in the celestial realm of spirits. This tree shimmers with a cold, clear light, and climbing its luminous branches is how the shaman retrieves lost souls, gains wisdom, or negotiates with divine powers. The light is not merely illumination, it is the visible flow of spiritual energy and ancestral memory. What makes these accounts a powerful historical description is their psychological reality. For the experiencer, the tree is as real as the ground beneath their feet, its light seared into memory with a clarity that feels more true than everyday sight. These visions are not dismissed as hallucinations, but revered as direct encounters with the fundamental architecture of reality. They echo with stunning precision the descriptions we have traced across continents and centuries, from Yggdrasil and the Mesoamerican ceiba to the Persian tree of life. This suggests something profound about the human mind. Across vast distances of time and geography, when consciousness is shifted into a certain state, it seems to generate or perceive the same archetypal map, a radiant connective tree. It is as if this luminous structure is a deep, shared blueprint within us, a way for the psyche to visualize its own connection to everything that is. The shaman's cosmic tree is perhaps the most intimate and authoritative account of all, because it is not a second-hand traveler's tale or a symbolic painting, but a reported first-person experience of standing in the presence of a living light that knows your name. It asks us what is more historically valid, a dusty manuscript about a glowing licus tree, or the tear-streaked face of a healer who has just returned from touching one. The shaman's inner vision of a cosmic tree of light is a profound personal truth, but the final account in our long list returns us to the external world with a chilling, modern precision. Across the latter half of the 20th century and into the 21st, a specific type of report began to emerge from military personnel, particularly pilots and special forces operatives in remote, dense forest regions. These are not tales from ancient scrolls, but from declassified documents and first-hand testimonies. The phenomenon described is often termed a low-frequency glow, a persistent, dim illumination seen in woodlands that seems to defy conventional explanation. A helicopter pilot flying a night mission over a Southeast Asian jungle might report a vast, amorphous patch of forest emitting a faint, eerie light, a glow that appears to pulse slowly, almost like a breathing organism. Ground troops on patrol in the boreal forests of northern Europe have given similar accounts, describing a silent, pervasive luminescence that seems to seep from the ground and the trees themselves, casting long, impossible shadows on a moonless night. The military context strips away the layers of myth and allegory, leaving behind a stark, operational mystery. These witnesses are trained observers, often using night vision technology that can amplify even the faintest light. What they describe is consistently odd. A glow that lacks a clear source, does not behave like fire or electrical discharge, and is sometimes associated with strange electromagnetic interference with their equipment. The explanations offered by those who investigate such reports are as fascinating as the sightings themselves, each a bridge from historical wonder to cutting-edge scientific inquiry. One leading theory points to plasma phenomena. In areas of high tectonic stress where the Earth's crust is grinding, the immense pressure can ionize gases in the air, creating brief, localized balls or sheets of glowing plasma that might hover near the forest floor, illuminating the trees from below. Another hypothesis involves piezoelectric effects. Certain crystalline rocks, like quartz, generate small electrical charges when subjected to mechanical stress. In a seismically active forest, the grinding of bedrock could theoretically produce enough of this piezoelectricity to cause the air to ionize or even to excite certain minerals in the soil or on tree bark, creating a faint, widespread glow. Then there is the possibility of an unknown scale of bioluminescence. We know fungi and insects can produce light, but what about a symbiotic network on a grand ecological scale? Could certain mosses, lichens, or even microbial mats in the soil, triggered by specific atmospheric or geochemical conditions, produce a coordinated, low-level luminescence across an entire hillside? This would be a natural phenomenon of staggering subtlety and complexity, a living light show visible only under perfect conditions of darkness and to observers in the right place at the wrong time. These modern reports do not solve the ancient mystery, they simply recast it in the language of geophysics and biology. They take the glowing tree out of the realm of pure legend and place it squarely in the realm of ongoing, legitimate scientific curiosity. When a Special Forces soldier describes a valley in the Caucasus Mountains that appears to breathe with a soft green light, he is walking in the footsteps of Pliny's informant, Marco Polo's woodcutters, and the conquistadors on El Yunque. He is encountering the same core wonder, but through a lens of radios, night vision goggles, and a desperate need for a tactical explanation. This final description closes our list of 25 by completing a circle. It shows us that the human encounter with unexplained light in the woods is not a relic of a credulous past, but a persistent thread in our experience of the natural world, one that continues to flicker at the very edge of our understanding, challenging us to look deeper. The soldier's report of a valley breathing with green light brings us to the final, crucial layer of the mystery, After 25 historical descriptions from myth to military log, we must ask the grounding question: what were people actually seeing? The answer lies at the intersection of three powerful forces: biology, chemistry, and the human mind itself. First, consider the silent, cold light of the forest floor, the glow witnessed by naturalists and woodsmen alike. This is the realm of bioluminescence, a living light. It is not fire, but a chemical reaction inside an organism. The most common source in woodlands is fungus. Species like the jack-o'-lantern mushroom, Omphalotus olerarius, or the bitter oyster, Panellus stypticus, emit a soft, greenish glow from their gills or mycelium. They do this to attract insects that will help spread their spores in the dark, damp environment they crave. When a fallen log is thoroughly colonized by these fungi, it truly does become a piece of glowing wood, a biological lantern that can shine for hours on a humid night. Then there are bacteria. Certain luminous bacteria can colonize the flesh of dead animals or even living trees, creating a faint bluish sheen on wounded bark. These are not legends, but observable, reproducible facts of nature. A conquistador in El Yunque, a medieval traveler in an Asian forest, or a Victorian naturalist in Europe, all could have been standing before the same quiet, organic chemistry, a decay that produces light instead of darkness. But not every glow is alive. Enter the second force, phosphorescence. This is a physical process where a material absorbs energy, often from sunlight, and then releases it slowly as a visible glow. This is the secret behind the American pioneer's lightwood. The dense, resinous heartwood of a long-dead pine contains compounds that, through slow oxidation over decades, become phosphorescent. Split that would open on a dark night, and the freshly exposed surface can emit that eerie, fading light. It is the tree's final, chemical memory of the sun. Minerals, too, can play this role. Certain rocks and soils containing phosphorescent salts might coat tree roots or bark. After a long, sunny day, these minerals could give off a faint radiance for a short time after dusk, making a grove seem touched by a lingering twilight. This is a passive, geological glow, an echo of daylight stored in stone and wood. Yet the most compelling ingredient in these ancient stories might be the observer themselves. This brings us to the psychological phenomenon of pareidolia, our brain's irresistible tendency to find familiar patterns in random shapes and shadows. Imagine a traveler, exhausted and alone in a deep forest at night. The moon is nearly full, casting a complex, dappled light through a dense canopy. Wind moves the branches, and the patches of moonlight shift and swim across the bark of an ancient oak. A mind steeped in tales of fairy lights and spirit trees is primed for revelation. Those dancing spots of silver can easily coalesce into the illusion of a tree radiating its own light. Now add another element, swamp gas. In marshy areas, the spontaneous combustion of methane, known as will-o'-the-wisp, creates fleeting, dancing flames that hover above the ground. A single, distant flicker of this ghostly flame, seen through a lattice of branches, could illuminate a single tree in a sudden, shocking burst, making it appear for a moment to blaze from within before the light vanishes into the dark. The brain, seeking narrative, connects the dots. It sees not a random reflection and a distant marsh gas, but a single, miraculous entity, a glowing tree. This is not a failure of observation, but a testament to how powerfully our expectations and fears shape what we believe we see. The forest at night is a Rorschach test, and for millennia, humanity has seen its deepest hopes and fears illuminated in the dark. So, does this scientific unpacking rob the stories of their magic? Not at all. It simply moves the wonder from the tree to the intricate, interconnected systems of our world. The real magic is that a mushroom can perform cold chemistry to make light, that a piece of wood can hold sunshine like a battery, and that the human mind is so woven into the fabric of mystery that it can transform a moonbeam and a shadow into a legend. The historical descriptions were never wrong. They were simply human, interpreting the profound and often inexplicable beauty of nature through the only lenses they had: story and symbol. The light was always real, whether it came from a spore, a mineral, or the brilliant pattern-seeking engine of our own consciousness. From ancient Hyperborea to modern military reports, this journey reveals a pattern woven deep into the human story. We have stood with Roman scholars and Norse shamans, walked beside Victorian naturalists and Amazonian healers, all united by a single, shimmering thread: the vision of a tree holding its own light. Each of the 25 accounts, whether grounded in biology, born of belief, or sparked by fear, is a testament to our enduring need to find wonder in the shadows. Our ancestors looked into the dark woods and saw more than an absence of sun. They saw a canvas for their greatest hopes and deepest fears, painting it with the glow of paradise, the cold fire of spirits, or the precise light of cosmic order. The scientific explanations, the foxfire fungus, the phosphorescent resin, the tricks of mist and moonlight, are satisfying. They give us answers, but they do not erase the question at the heart of all these stories. Were our ancestors merely explaining what they saw with the best tools they had, constructing myths around misunderstood mushrooms and swamp gases? Or is it possible they were perceiving something subtler, a quality of the world that our modern, analytical gaze has learned to filter out? A sense that some places are inherently numinous, that the boundary between the material and the magical is thinner under certain boughs, and that light, in all its forms, is the language in which that truth is spoken. Perhaps the real magic is not in a tree that physically glows, but in the unbroken human impulse to see it, to need it, to record it across continents and centuries. It speaks to a shared longing for a world that is still alive with mystery, where nature has secrets that resist our full comprehension. So the next time you walk in a forest at dusk, pause for a moment as the last light fades. Look into the gathering dark between the trees. What do you see? A simple, empty night, or the potential for a different kind of vision, one that your own distant ancestors might have known well? We would love to hear if you have any local legends of glowing trees, strange lights in the woods, or unexplained phenomena passed down in your own community. Share those stories in the comments below. Let us continue mapping this luminous human mystery together. And if you enjoyed this journey through the shadows and the light, subscribe for more explorations into the world's greatest historical puzzles.